Hello and welcome to Inside Luxury Travel with me, Varun Sharma, in partnership with Hoteliers Global. Each week, we shine a light on the people and stories shaping the very best of global hospitality. On this episode, my guest is Leora Halpern, who is globally recognized as a hospitality marketing strategist and author. She is one of the industry's most influential leaders and educators. Currently, she is Associate Professor of the Practice at Boston University School of Hospitality Administration, where she teaches experiential and digital marketing alongside leading her own consultancy, LHL Communications. Previously, Global Director of Marketing and Communications at HVS, Leora has enjoyed senior roles at ITT Sheraton and the Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau. Phew, I got through that. Leora, welcome. It's so wonderful to have you on my podcast. I'm going to start off by asking you, where are you in the world today?
Varun, first of all, hi, and thank you. And who is that person you just talked about? Because I'm looking for that person. I'm actually home on Long Island, New York. I live in Long Island. I work in Boston. I live in Long Island. We could talk about that later.
So it's a commute for you.
It is a commute, and it's a commute that a lot of people look at me and think, are you crazy? But I've been doing it for so long now that it's just part of what I do and who I am that I don't think twice about it. And it gives me the best of both worlds. I love being in Boston during the academic school year and with students. And I love being home on Long Island on weekends between semesters and especially in the summertime. So that's how I rationalize it, but that's how I truly enjoy it. Yes, I have a commute.
Now, before we go into your many accomplishments, I'd like to start off with how you got into the hospitality industry.
I actually started in hospitality in high school, but didn't realize it at the time, nor did I actually realize it or reflect upon it until recently. But in high school, I had summer jobs, which is how a lot of folks actually do think about working in restaurants, working in hotels as a summer job. I'd like to actually tell those folks you can make a great career out of that too. But I guess I started in high school, but didn't deliberately go into hospitality in high school. It was really just for experience and for getting paid. But in college, where I actually studied to be a broadcast journalist, there was one class, one professor, one class who taught hotel marketing. And that was the beginning of me going down a different trajectory that I never anticipated. And then it just went on from there.
Okay. Were you ever tempted? I mean, as you said, you did hotel marketing, but that's kind of back of house. Were you ever tempted, or did you indeed do front of house? Because, I mean, I've stayed at hundreds of hotels around the world, and I've always found that people who work back of house and front of house have a better understanding of the guest.
So let me preface, when I worked through college, my work study job, I had to make money in college too. I worked in a restaurant on campus. So there I was a server, I was a busser, I was a runner, I was an expediter in the kitchen. I also worked inventory in the stockroom. So that was sort of my first taste of actually front of house connecting with guests. Yes, it was a university setting. And again, that was a job. That wasn't necessarily something that I thought was going to be a foundation for me, which was great. Ultimately, when I did have a role with Sheraton Hotels in New York, which was almost a 9-year gig, even though I was working in marketing, I was on property and responsible for a region of hotels, but I was on property. So we were part of the operation because we had to deliver the marketing message that the operation could actually execute. So yes, I attended operations meetings. When there were situations where we had to roll up our sleeves and fill in, work at the front desk, help out in housekeeping, there were those opportunities. And I will tell you, we also had to be manager on duty, which means we had to wear our name badge. And if there was an issue, you were the person they called. So I am grateful for having worked in a restaurant. I actually think everybody should work in a restaurant because I think it humbles you and it teaches you about working with other people. And I'm really grateful that I had this on property experience with the hotel because yes, it gives you a whole perspective of different dimensions and how it all works together, whether it's front facing and employee facing, which frankly, I'll switch that. Employees should come first and then the guest, but we'll talk
Yes.
about that
I,
later.
I mean, I recently saw in an international newspaper CEO of a very famous hotel group saying that the guest is God, and
That's
and
an
I thought,
Indian mantra, isn't it now?
well,
That comes from an
yes,
Indian mantra too,
but
the guest is
I
God.
mean, my belief is actually, your staff is God, and then the guest will be treated as a God. In the end, if you don't treat your staff with the greatest respect and love and cherish them, that will not filter down to the guest. But anyway, we're
But
going off.
well, I want to share a point about that. I agree with that. And there is a restaurateur in New York City who I consider a hospitality hero of mine, who wrote an amazing book called Setting the Table. And I actually encourage my students to read that book. And he's phrased it and termed it enlightened hospitality. And one of the principles of enlightened hospitality is your employee should come first for the exact reason you just shared, Varun. Because if we don't have that joy and excitement and buy-in and synergy and chemistry together internally, how on earth are we ever going to project that externally? So agreed.
But hospitality is often described as a feeling rather than a product. I mean, how should today's marketers capture and communicate something that's so intangible?
It's the real.
Yes.
I actually consider hospitality a philosophy. I consider hospitality a mindset. And I also consider hospitality a business differentiator because I think any business, in addition to the traditional hospitality businesses like hotels and restaurants and attractions and tourism attractions or airlines or cruises, but insurance companies, retail, banks, engineering firms, mechanics, every company better have hospitality to be able to be that, to separate itself from the crowd.
Yeah. So
Shouldn't every business have? So to me, it's a business differentiator, a philosophy, and a mindset.
So I worked for a broadcaster that basically believed as soon as you walked through the door as a guest, there was coffee, tea, there was, sandwiches, whatever. And that's hospitality because you felt as a guest that you were being treated so well that actually everything else that happened within the building, was hospitality led. But it's first of all, you mentioned a restaurateur in New York. Who was that, please?
His
Who
name
wrote
is
the book?
Danny Meyer,
Right.
and he's got quite a collection, a portfolio of restaurants in New York City, including the famed Union Square Cafe, Gramercy Tavern, a few others, and a different IPO, a different business under his company is actually Shake Shack, the chain
Right.
that is, um, pretty popular. But Danny, modern day restaurateur with a really wonderful philosophy.
Okay. You are a published author too, developing your marketing mindset, which came out in 2025, 2026, marketing mindset in motion. In fact, you talk a lot about developing a marketing mindset. But how does that actually look like in a day-to-day running of a hotel or resort?
Fair enough. So I'm going to show the first book. You could tell I love the color purple.
Yeah,
So
okay.
developing your marketing mindset, real world lessons from hospitality. I wrote this originally, Varun, to celebrate 10 years of teaching, which is not something that I actually planned on doing. That was not on my radar. It was a happy accident. It was supposed to be a one semester gig that led into now it's 11 years. So clearly it worked. Um, but I wrote it to celebrate what I learned in the classroom, not just what I taught, but what I learned from these amazing students who are now today's leaders in hospitality. And so, how I've structured this first book I talk about the concept of critical thinking and assessing a situation from a holistic viewpoint. Don't just take information at face value, dig and research, quality research, qualified research, legitimate research. And then I talk about strategic thinking. How do we plan for the future methodically, not just sort of these one-hit wonders, these gimmicks in marketing? And I always talk about you've got to always inject the hospitality. And so developing that mindset means I know a lot of folks who go, oh, marketing. And even with my class, it's a required class. Oh, I'm not going to be good at marketing. I'm not great at it. I'm just taking it because it's required. Or an entrepreneur who says, I know I need marketing help. I'm not the best at marketing. The truth is, I really believe everyone should have a marketing mindset, whether marketing's in your title or not, whether you're an intrapreneur or an entrepreneur, whether you're marketing a product or yourself, you need to be aware of it and you need to think critically and think strategically.
Leora, it is interesting. I meet a lot of general managers and hotel owners who say, I'm not a marketer. What
Right.
advice would you give to them? I mean, apart from buying a book.
Oh, yes, because I'm really hoping that the examples that are in the book, which are based on hotels and restaurants and actual real world projects that we did in the city of Boston in my class, they're simple and they're easy to understand. And I can see people, whether you're in traditional hospitality or not, reading through these mini case studies going, oh, I can relate to that. And how do you transfer that into your industry? I would tell executives who say, I'm not a marketer, well, there are ways to be able to be more self-aware so that you can think like a marketer. You don't have to actually execute the work, but if you can think critically, strategically, creatively, and use examples from other industries to get the juices flowing, that's the bare minimum. Let's at least have that marketing mindset so that we can let the experts actually execute it around us. But then we know what questions to ask and what to expect.
One thing I've noticed is that a lot of general managers, CEOs are all quite uh, business savvy when it used to be more hospitality savvy. And they're
Mm-hmm.
more data driven marketing. How can they use data driven marketing but still have that deeply human side of hospitality and keep it, with that word, authentic? What advice would you give on that?
So the first chapter of this first book is titled Think Like a Marketer, Act Like the Owner. And the truth is, we have to be business minded because if we don't make a profit, we don't have a hotel to run. We don't have
No,
a restaurant to operate.
no.
So we do have to make money or else we don't have anything to offer. What I would recommend is, and I have a chapter called Start with the End Goals. How do we measure success? How do we know what's going to keep us profitable and a successful business? So we can't just do these activities and creative marketing promotions or whatever we're doing in our operation or menu changes or whatever we're doing. It needs to lead up to, well, how do we measure success? Let's know what those metrics are that we have to measure, and then we determine how to get there so that we can measure it along the way. If we're just doing things ad hoc and not realizing how to measure it at the end, and is that measurement a true signal of profitability, awareness, whatever it might be, we're wasting our time. So we do
So
have to think like a marketer that way, don't we?
moving on with that, what lessons do hoteliers underestimate when it
Who
comes to storytelling and brand purpose?
off the top of my head, that's a great question. I think off the top of my head, when we hear marketers say, oh, we've got to get social media presence and we've got to, stretch our awareness and expand our reach or increase our followers, does that actually convert into business? And I think that's where a lot of folks go, is that really where I want to spend my time? But again, go back to that question. what is it that we're trying to accomplish and how do we measure success? So if we're trying to expand awareness in a certain market, then yeah, that kind of awareness is important. If we're trying to help promote a particular experience or group business or a different segment, that may not be the best way to do it. So we really have to determine what is it that we're trying to accomplish. And don't cut social media short. Don't sort of whisk it away as that's not going to get us business, because the truth is that is how people are getting their information. Um, don't slight influencer marketing today. That's how Gen Z millennials are getting their information, and they are our traveler. So I would say before we jump to conclusions and assume that's not what we're supposed to do, again, work with the team to determine what are we trying to accomplish? How do we measure that to know we are succeeding? And then how do we go get there?
So, in an era of social media,
Mm,
influencers, and AI,
AI.
yeah, what still matters most when building trust with that guest that's going to be coming through your door, or hopefully coming through your door?
Relationship. Relationship builds trust. Doing the good work, delivering that right service consistently at every touch point. In in actually the second book, which is coming out February 2026, called Marketing Mindset in Motion, I talk about the fact that traditional marketing was used to be called the funnel.
Mm.
How do we get awareness? How do we drive interest? How do we lead to conversion? It was a reverse pyramid. And then it led to this sort of circular funnel. How do we get people to come into our doors and keep them coming back? But today I call it the pinball machine. For anybody who played pinballs in arcades, anybody who's probably 40 plus, you understand what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The zigzagging of the pinball machine. That's how we're getting our information today, right? We're getting our information from so many different touch points. How do we ensure consistency of messaging, consistency of the brand? How do we ensure that we're saying the same thing at all these different places where people are getting the information? That builds trust.
Mm.
But the humanity, the delivery of the service, the people, when folks think back on a hospitality experience, it's 9 times out of 10, it's the people that they remember that cross their paths. We have to remember the humanity. And I'd like to think, at least in my world, I've been blessed in my orbit of global hospitality relationships. Our folks are just truly, genuinely good people who do leave great memories, who do want people to have exceptional experiences, because that actually builds a great experience for us too,
Yeah.
but really for them to come back. And I think we just have to hire right, don't we? We have to hire. And actually, I'll go back to my hospitality hero for a minute, Varun, Danny Meyer. As part of his principles of enlightened hospitality, he talks about the 51%. You've got to hire folks who just, you can't train them on that. You can't teach them how to behave like that. You could teach them the hard skills, but the 51% has to take them over. So he is my hero. I do agree with that. And I would say, how do we keep the trust, and how do we get past the AI and all the stuff that's coming our way? I mean, 9 times out of 10, I look at material online and I go, is that real? Like, I question it these days. And I'd like to think it, intelligent people are going to don't take things at face value. We've got to look at things critically. But it's out there and it's going to be used. But to me, for a beautiful hospitality experience, to go to a destination, to be at a museum, to talk to people, to interact with people, it's the people that we're going to remember.
It's interesting because when I started my career, a wonderful general manager called Sally Bullock at a hotel called the Athenaeum in London, she always said to me, you can teach someone how to pour a cup of tea, but you can't teach them how to pour that cup of tea with love. And
Ah,
it's
beautiful.
that is so true. My final work question for you is
Sure.
5 years ago. Um, I would have said, how would hospitality change in the next 5 years? And you would have probably said to me, AI will be coming along. And will that be still prevalent in the next, 5 years?
I'm not sure we know exactly what's going to be here in 5 years. Things are changing so quickly, aren't they now, Varun? So I think AI is going to morph in other ways too. I think 10, 15 years ago, people would have said to us, social media, that's not going to be here.
Yeah.
20 something years ago, OTAs, people would have thought that wasn't going to be here. That's morphed, but it still exists in some format. I think these disruptors like Airbnb, people would have said, that's not our competition. That's not going to be here. But that's, evolved. So I think AI is going to evolve in some other way. Will it be called something else? It may very well. I think we have to be, today we live in a time where we just have to keep up with it to try to get ahead of it and work with what we've got because it's going to be continually changing.
Okay, a couple of fun questions before we end
Okay,
there.
sure.
Firstly, your greatest hospitality experience ever?
As a guest,
Yeah, as a guest.
greatest. There have
Something
been
that
many.
something you remember for your entire life.
Well, there's something fresh in my mind. I'm not sure if it's the greatest, in all fairness. I'm not sure if it's the greatest experience because I've been blessed that I've had many great experiences. But most recently, my husband and I traveled to Prague, Czech Republic. And we stayed at this wonderful little hotel called the Agnes, which we really had no idea what to expect. It was a 20-room hotel. And talk about the people being memorable. Talk about the expectation, the delivery of hospitality at every point. But here's one thing that I loved. When we arrived, it was early in the morning. Typically, when you arrive at your hotel, you grab your key, you go to your room, then maybe you call down to the desk with some questions. They greeted us with tea, coffee, little biscuits, asked us to sit in the lobby. They didn't want us to go to the room. They wanted us to sit. And my husband and I, the type A New Yorkers that we are, right? Um, I actually really enjoyed that. And my husband's going, what's going on here? And they sat down with us and said, did you plan anything for this trip? Do you have anything scheduled? Do you want us to help you with that? What are you looking to do while you're here? What kinds? And we're fast friends. Already we're still in touch with each other personally because you just sort of built these friendships. Um, they surprised us. I think that's what I love about hospitality with the surprise and delight. They actually called us to find out what time we're coming in by train. We came in by train from another European city, and they said, we're going to pick you up at the train. We didn't expect any of that. It was going above and beyond, but meeting people along the way. And actually, what it did was it sort of calmed us down and it made us really live in the moments and in the present. So I'm sharing that again. It may not have been the greatest hospitality experience, but it is very fresh in my mind because it's recent and it was a wonderful hospitality.
And
They
that was
delivered it so genuinely.
the Hotel Agnes in Prague. Yeah, remember
Oh,
that one?
yes, highly
Yes.
recommend.
Now,
Highly-
finally, obviously, I've travelled to New York and to Boston, and being a generalist, I would say go to the Frick Collection if you're in New York, and if you're in
Sure.
Boston, you go to the Cheers Bar. Um,
Yes, that's okay. That's
for
good.
for first-time visitors to New York and Boston, what would your advice be to visit one thing in each city? What would they be?
I that probably will change every single year. I happen to be a museum lover. I also happen to be a music lover. Um, but something I did personally, being home in New York between semesters now, I soaked in as much Broadway as I possibly could. And I would just tell folks, those are experiences.
Go to a
Um,
show.
Go to a show because
Yeah.
they are just, they make you think, they give you creativity, they give you intelligence. The performances, even the creativity of a set design, as simple as it could be or as complicated as could be. Um, it's I saw four shows in the last 4 weeks, I think,
Goodness.
and I soaked it all in and it got me thinking and it's That's New York. That's
And what would
joy.
you do in
So
Boston? What and in Boston? And
walk,
Boston?
walk, 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 walk. Boston is a walkable city, and I would
Yeah,
say get out, get the fresh air everywhere you turn within sort of the immediate neighborhoods of the traditional Boston, Back Bay and Beacon Hill, the historical Boston, rather. There's something to see. Now, granted, history in the United States is 250 years old as opposed to the rest of the world where it's a lot older. This year is an important year for us because it is the 250th birthday of the United States. And so there will be a lot happening, particularly in
in
Boston.
Boston. Yeah, yeah.
But walk, enjoy what you see from a historical perspective, see the mix of people that comprise Boston. And I'm just trying to think of sort of like a favorite place for me. A favorite place for me in Boston happens to be the Italian neighborhood called the North End. I just go to a little place. It's a little Italian deli called Salou Maria. I get my sandwich, sit on the steps, watch people walk by, and just there's just something marvelous about feeling, I don't know, different and
Well, if
removed and
anyone in
escaped.
hospitality ever needed some free advice, go
Oh,
to
I'm happy to
Boston.
share that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Have a sandwich with you in
Have a
Boston.
sandwich at Salou Maria.
Leora Lance, this has been such an honor to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Varun. It really was great to talk to you, and I'm very flattered to be among your conversations. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.